Like that's an easier way to get your way to home base there. And reminded me of a very famous story about Bill O'Reilly. Fox News, Bill O'Reilly. And here's this character who didn't just have a simulated rubber penis, he had a vibrating one. Okay, he had a collection of these things. And would brag to these girls about how he was great at using them on girls and doing interns and producers as a show. And another thing comes to my memory. One time I'm watching Bill O'Reilly interview Trump. And he says, Donald, you and I have shared a lot of milkshakes. And I'm going to bet you a milkshake that this is what's going to... And you're watching Trump's face. And Trump's got a poker face. But this guy's saying, what the hell is going on? Why is he talking about this? Milkshake is code for something. They're not talking about milkshakes you get at McDonald's and buy a milkshake and drink it. They're talking about something that they've shared and they're betting and passing around that are not literal milkshakes. And here you have this pattern, too, of O'Reilly and Epstein's buddy there. Again, with this vibrating penis. Now, you say, well, Ed, what happened to this lawsuit? Why isn't that? How come Copperfield's not underneath the prison? Why isn't he arrested for doing this? There was a 2-year FBI investigation, Department of Justice investigation into this case. But the focus in the investigation was more on the victim than it was on the accused. And what happened was about a year later, or close to 2 years later, and they went and they served subpoenas and search warrants all over Epstein and stuff like that. And by the way, the hotel chain, they've arrested and kicked down doors and found other magicians at these places with collections of child pornography, of images of raping little kids. But there was another incident about 2 years later in a Seattle hotel where this poor young girl is on a date with some guy. They wind up back at this expensive hotel. According to the official story is they're both enjoying mutual oral sex on each other. Now, then that's where the story takes a turn. She says that's as far as she wanted to go, and that he forced the rest of the activity. He says, at that point, she said, for $2,000, you can have everything. And that's when there was a dispute. And so we know there was a dispute, and we know she left that hotel room crying, leaving behind her pantyhose and her underwear. And we know that as soon as she got to the first people she saw, she said, call the police, I'd just been raped. And we know that they took her back in an ambulance. And in the ambulance, she said, spontaneous utterances. I can't believe this has happened to me again. This just happened to me a year ago. And then she went on to say the other case was much more important than this one, and she didn't want to mess that case up. And she was afraid that if this case came out into the public, she would lose credibility in the other case. Now, let's look at this situation here. If you're the victim of a sex crime, that there is one symptom, a result of that sex crime could be what is perceived as promiscuity. Okay, because the woman wants to take control, she wants to take back ownership of what was stolen from her, and she wants to be the one controlling it. And it is not unusual for the victim of a sex crime to become a sex worker, or promiscuous, you might call it. So for that to happen is not out of the question. And also, it does not invalidate that the first crime down there in Bahamas did not happen. If anything, it's a symptom that it did happen. But the FBI in all its wisdom says, well, she lied about that second case, and she's likely guilty of prostitution and lying about, because she refused to cooperate with the Seattle police any further. because she was afraid it was going to affect the big case. Well, who can blame her? She's got a lawsuit. She's got an investigation going. She wants this guy to be imprisoned. This other guy, who knows what the deal with that was. Now, as far as, now let's look at probability. Percentages. I live in Las Vegas. The sex industry here is a big business. I'm very familiar with how it works. Okay? And there's many different forms of prostitution. There's Craigslist ads. There's brothels. There's massage parlors. There's the legal brothels down in Pahrump and stuff like that. There's these escort services. With the phone books here are like 25% of them are 3-4 inches thick, or of escort services. Okay? It's a big business here in Nevada. There is a form of prostitution where the woman will, and usually it starts at the hotel bars. They'll be sitting at the hotel bar. They'll meet a guy, a tourist. Okay, they're acting friendly to each other. They get back up to the room, and they start some intimacy. And then she'll say, okay, well, to go any further, I want money. Now, that's probably the most risky form of prostitution that there is. A lot of girls on Craigslist will do that as well. But that's probably the most risky form of prostitution that there is, because you're betting on a confrontation alone in a room with a guy. And usually in those cases, there's a pimp or a cohort or a friend very close nearby. In this case, there was not. Now, that's a small percentage, probably the smallest percentage of prostitution is done in that way. Okay? Because you're banking on it. You almost guarantee the confrontation. So we're to believe that in this case, this woman chose the most riskiest form of prostitution without any kind of personal backup. She had to call the police and rely on hotel staff to protect her. Okay? So that's unlikely. The percentages are unlikely if we're weighing percentages. Now, let's assume everything. Okay, she's 100% guilty of being a prostitute. That does not mean you can still rape a prostitute. Okay? You can still be guilty of raping a woman and even if she's a prostitute, you can still go to prison for raping a woman that's a prostitute. Even if you're a prostitute, no money's changed hands, by the way, at this point, and you have unwanted sexual contact on a woman, at that point, that's still a crime. That guy should still be arrested. You understand? There's a lot of factors here that point to, again, as we've talked about a large portion this night with me and Pierce Redmond, of federal Justice Department, FBI, collusion and the rape of women by these powerful rich men who all seem to be friends. So I hope I made that clear. Okay? And by the way, too, you can even go on TMZ. There's recordings, voicemail recordings of it would appear, and other people here locally came forward and talked about this, that Copperfield had a pattern of approaching women in his audience, and usually women that had their boyfriend with them, and that he had a thing about, getting this girl away from her boyfriend there at the hotel, at the show, and then trying to make further inviting them back to the island. So anyway, there's that. Hey. Let me see what else I got here in the notes. And Aaron, I appreciate you saying you want to send me something for the notes, but the way I write the notes is the problem. Because I keep going back and forth to them. All right. No, that's about everything I got for tonight. Let's see, I can go back here and read up some of these other women involved with Rob Lowe. You might want to look into Jodie Foster and her background. Very interesting. She does a movie about called The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane, where she's being preyed upon by an adult male when she's a child. And who's that adult male? Martin Sheen. And she has a pattern of doing these kind of... And there's some YouTube stuff, too, with some allegations about her. You might want to take a look at. After this tonight, Pierce Redmond, I'm going to be playing him right after this. He's got a interview with some guy about the Crazy Joe Gallo, the Bonanno family, or his Colombo family. That was Bonanno. Crime family. Back in the 70s in New York City. And it was Brooklyn for sure. And a kind of interesting story. If you look up the movie Crazy Joe, I know two people that were in that movie. One was a kid named Joe Tedesco, who was a friend of mine in school, back in the third grade. He was in a little scene there with a bunch of kids in that movie Crazy Joe. And my father's friend, Robert Sacchi, was also in that movie. And a very interesting story about Crazy Joe Gallo. Okay. Let me pull this up here. And it's loading up so slow. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play Pierce Redmond. So what I'll do is remind everybody about the member section. You get a year. I'm throwing an extra month, plus the rest of this month, for $65. But the way to get that is you contact me directly, oppermanreport@gmail.com, and I'll send you a PayPal notice, and you pay me through PayPal. I get the money right away, and then we cut out the Tiny Pass. I was going to do a whole 20 minutes tonight because we had 20 minutes to kill. I taped another show that was supposed to play tonight about the fascinating story about the serial killer. And oh my God, this thing is incredible, and the guest was incredible too. It's going to play next Friday night for sure. It's a good show, but I just need 17 minutes to fill at the end. About the member section and YouTube, I've explained this a million times. There's even YouTube shows that it just called how to watch the shows and explain all this. Now, I own OppermanReport.com. I don't own YouTube, and I don't own Tiny Pass or the paywall or any of that stuff. I have no control over what goes on there. And YouTube doesn't know if you're a member at OppermanReport.com or not. They have no idea if you are or not. When you become a member at OppermanReport.com, the deal was when I first started doing it, I'm going to give you 3 shows a month. Okay? Sometimes I can do more, all right? But 3 shows a month. If you go back and look, it's only been 2 years, and you count how many shows, there's way more than 3 shows. There's more than 5 or 6 shows a month on there. Plus extra shows I've been able to do during the week for free as well. Now, when I tape a show for the member section, okay, if it goes up on YouTube before it gets to the member section, that doesn't mean that I'm cheating you or I'm stealing from you or you're not going to get the show. It's either going to play live Friday night or it's going to play in the member section. I just don't know yet what I'm going to do with it. So I put it up on YouTube for $1 or for $2. Now, if you like supporting the show and you like the work that I do, that you hear on the show, forget the work that I'm doing behind the scenes when I'm taping statements from these people and working on stuff and talking to people off the air. Because trust me, I'm doing a lot. If you like that and you want to support that and say, you know what, Ed, I want to support the show, I want to become a member. And you get the documents and the court cases and the videos on there and all the extra shows, that's great. But when you start wanting to contact me and complain because you see a show on YouTube and you don't want to dig into your pocket for $2 to pay okay, just stop and think how much you're sabotaging the show. When I got 20, 30 people email me about, well, Ed, how come this show's on YouTube and it's not in the member section? How come, Ed, how come this isn't available? just stop and think, how much you're destroying the work we're trying to do here. With this, you got to give me a break,